Right. Good day to everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Ingrid Coetzee. I'm the Director of Biodiversity, Nature and Health at ICLEI's Global Cities Biodiversity Centre. And I just need to explain to everybody that I'm standing in on behalf of our Deputy Secretary General, Kirby Brunt, who has just very recently been called into a very urgent and important meeting. And she has asked me to read her welcome address and also just to convey her apologies, and her sort of appreciation that we are able to start off our webinar series in the lead up to the CBD COP17 today, in this very important month of May, because we're all also working together for International Biodiversity Day on the 22nd of May. And then this, as I said, is really the whole idea of our webinar series is to support and help local and subnational governments understand better the Convention on Biological Diversity. So just a few housekeeping rules. Firstly, just to let everybody know, and you should have seen it when you joined Zoom, that we are recording the webinar, and we understand that by joining the webinar, you accept and agree to being recorded. Secondly, you will have noted that all the participants are muted, and we do this to avoid any disturbance to speakers. Thirdly, we do have a full program and limited time, so we're not able to accommodate a Q&A session, but you are welcome to pop any question you may have into the Q&A box, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. And then fourthly, we are going to provide some opportunity for interaction in the form of running a short poll, which we will launch just after I've concluded the opening remarks on behalf of Kirby Brunt. So, and with that, with those housekeeping rules behind us, it really is a pleasure for myself on behalf of ICLEI and our other partners, and you can see them listed on the bottom of the screen there in the opening slide, to open this series called Navigating the Convention on Biological Diversity, what it means for local and subnational governments and what they need to know. Particularly at this time, when the global community is facing the interconnected crises of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution, the role of cities and regions has never been more critical. This series is specifically designed to strengthen your engagement in the processes of the CBD by equipping you as representatives of cities and regions and subnational governments from around the world with a practical knowledge and understanding of the structures, how negotiations work, and entry points for action from cities and subnational governments. 2026 is a really important pivotal year because we have a triple COP year, with major global negotiations taking place across the biodiversity, climate and desertification conventions and agendas. Decisions taken in these spaces will shape the future of our ecosystems and communities for decades to come. To ensure that the voices and experience and solutions of cities and regions are reflected in these negotiations is absolutely essential. And this is where ICLEI and our partners can play a critical role. Together with the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, UNEP, IUCN, Regions 4, the European Committee of the Regions, and California's Global Biodiversity Alliance, we are working to elevate the voice of local and subnational governments in the CBD to ensure they are recognized as key actors in implementation and are recognized also as essential contributors to multilateral decision-making and to achieving and contributing to the achievement of global biodiversity targets. So today's sessions on foundations for subnational and local engagement in the Convention on Biological Diversity is meant to set the stage for the start of this journey. It will introduce you to the CBD's institutional architecture and processes, unpack how local and subnational government constituencies have engaged in negotiations in the past and continue to, and we hope to provide a clear understanding of what cities and regions can expect when participating in the biodiversity COPs and how to do this strategically and effectively. As we begin this webinar series, we invite you not just to learn, but to step into your role within the convention. The road to COP17 is already underway, and the decisions made there at the end of the year in Yerevan in Armenia will depend on the ambition, coordination, and action that we are building together already on this journey. Whether you represent a city, a region, or partner organization, your engagement matters. This series is intended as a space to strengthen your voice, connect with the process, and to turn global commitments into local impact. So let us use this opportunity to move from understanding to action together. And with these short welcome words, I'm going to now invite our participants, our audience today, to participate in a quick poll. We have a series of 8 questions. And really, this is just for us to familiarize with the CBD processes and help clarify some understandings that you have. You can see it up now on your screen. If you can just run through the first question, which statement best reflects your understanding of the CBD and negotiations? So run through each of these questions. I will give you 3 to 4 minutes. As you scroll it down on your screen, you will see you will be able to click it to get the codes, and then to there you are. We can start seeing people already making their inputs. So people have responded to the second and to the third question. To the fourth question. Still getting some responses in. Fifth question. Sixth question. I think we've got, I just want to check 100% there. Let me just go back to see if anybody's going back. Yeah, I think we are done. So if my tech team can end the poll, maybe I should do that. But maybe just quickly for everybody's benefit. So as I said, this was really intended just to assess the general understanding. And we can see with the first question, I think that there's quite a variety. The majority seem to understand that the CBD negotiations are political processes where multiple stakeholders can contribute, and then a lesser response in terms of just being technical and just relevant to diplomats, and 1 or 2 saying that they were not sure, which I think is a fair enough assessment. The second question around which is the main decision-making authority in the CBD, I think the majority there have got it right. It's 75%. Very much a similar sort of response as we had with the first question in terms of the distribution of responses. The third question around whether it's true or false, only national governments can participate in the CBD negotiations. There again, very much a similar distribution of responses. And yes, it is indeed false in the sense that in the CBD, there's also opportunity for, as you will hear today, for major groups to participate in the processes. The fourth question is, how are CBD decisions typically made at COP meetings? And here we have another fairly similar response distribution by consensus amongst parties, which is an important understanding, I think. The fifth question is, which of the following best describes the role of the CBD Secretariat? There it's a lot clearer. I think that people do understand the Secretariat. I'm sure, however, that Bianca will come up with some surprises in her presentation. And then the last question is, can local and subnational governments engage in the CBD negotiations and reporting processes? There too, I'm really happy to say that people are saying, the majority are saying yes. So I'm not sure if we're able to share the results with everybody, but let me do that. And I think we can with that. I think it's really interesting to see that it's good to know that there's a very solid consensus around understanding of what the CBD and its processes are about. There is still some uncertainty in terms of some of the questions, but I think it's a good start and it's a good basis for our webinar series, not just for the one today, but also taking it forward. And I just want to thank everybody that participated in this poll. I hope you found it fun. And we had lots more questions, as one always does have, but I think that we now need to move over to the real business and to take it forward in terms of introducing our speakers. So really, what I'm going to do is just introduce our two speakers. Myself, I've already been introduced, but we have Bianca Lisboa Brazil, who is the program manager for mainstreaming and also the local and subnational major group. She is with the CBD Secretariat. And then we have Frédéric Pellerin-Catelier, who's the senior advisor, biodiversity and natural resources in the Ministry of International Relations and the Francophonie in the government of Quebec. So we're an all-ladies team today, and we hope that we are going to really keep you very informed and that you will find our interventions today very interesting. So we're going to start off. Firstly, I'm going to hand over to Bianca, and then Frédéric and I will give a bit of a reflection on our own experiences as representing different constituencies, and then we'll have a more formalized panel discussion between the three of us. So without further ado, Bianca, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. I just want to begin by thanking ICLEI and their Cities Biodiversity Center who convened this meeting along with the partners. I've been having the opportunity and the honor of collaborating more closely with these organizations, and I'm very, very encouraged by the level of commitment and engagement. I was tasked today to walk you through the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is how it what it is, how it works, and most importantly, I think, what are the opportunities as cities and subnational governments for engagement. I'll try to keep it very practical and grounded on what happens in reality, especially at the COP. To really understand where we are today, it helps to step back a little bit. So the history of the CBD is very much intertwined with decades of international cooperation. It really starts back in 1972 at the Stockholm Conference of the Human Environment. This was the first major global meeting where countries came together to talk about environmental issues and so forth. It set out the first shared principles for cooperation, and it also led to the creation of the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP. So then 20 years later, in 1992, we had the Rio Earth Summit. This was actually a turning point. Countries recognized that environmental issues are deeply linked to development and that we needed global frameworks to address all of these challenges. That's where the three Rio Conventions were born: the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Convention to Combat Desertification. So together, these still form the backbone of the global environmental governance today. The CBD actually entered into force in 1993, and the first COP, the first Conference of the Parties, was held in 1994. Since then, it has continued to evolve through decisions and global milestones. So one important moment, of course, was 2010 in Nagoya, where countries adopted the Aichi biodiversity targets and launched the UN Decade for Biodiversity. That was actually also where the first plan of action on subnational governments, cities, and other local authorities for biodiversity was adopted. Then in 2015, we saw further alignment, and we saw the launch of the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement adoption, and most recently, of course, in 2022, countries adopted the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that was the successor of the Aichi biodiversity targets, which now guides global biodiversity action to 2030. At COP15, parties also adopted a new plan of action for cities and subnational governments through Decision 1512. So what we're working on today really is the result of a long and evolving process. So this slide, I try to bring a quick overview of multilateral environment agreements, or MEAs. So at the core, MEAs are international treaties negotiated by countries to address global environmental challenges, issues that no single country can resolve on its own, and no single group as well. So what's important to understand, MEAs, they just don't set goals, they create systems. So countries come together, they negotiate the agreement, they commit to action, they implement those commitments at national and local levels, and then they report back on progress. Over time, this allows for monitoring, review, and adjustment wherever needed. All of these, of course, is guided by decision-making bodies like the Conference of the Parties, or COPs. In the middle of the slide, you can see some of the key agreements. So we have the Rio Conventions, of course, I already mentioned those, but these are particularly important because they were all adopted at the Earth Summit. And we have the other, of course, biodiversity-related agreements like CITES, the Ramsar Conventions on Wetlands, the Convention on Migratory Species, the International Treaty on Plant and Genetic Resources. Each one of those focuses on a specific aspect of biodiversity or ecosystems or challenges, but together they form a broader system. I also included a short note on UNEP's role in all of this, because this is always something that we get asked. What is the standing of UNEP in all of this mosaic of treaties? So UNEP does not run the agreements directly, but it plays a very important supporting role across the system. That role varies depending on each one of the agreements, and it can include, it ranges, right, from hosting secretariats to providing technical and scientific support to facilitating coordination, as well as supporting implementation. So I think the key takeaway here is that MEAs are not isolated. They are part of a broader system supported by different institutions, including UNEP, of course, working together towards shared global goals. So now, zooming into our CBD, our Convention on Biological Diversity. At the core of the CBD, there are three main objectives. First, the conservation of biodiversity. Second, the sustainable use of its components. And of course, the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from genetic resources. These are intentionally broad. The idea was not to create a very rigid treaty, but rather a flexible frameworks where countries, and importantly, actors across all levels, can implement in different ways depending on their contexts and realities. And I think this is where cities and regions really can see themselves, right? So there are different contexts, different realities, but conserving the biological diversity, the sustainable use of its components, etc., they really, really are reflected in our local actions and local lives. So now, in terms of how the CBD is actually structured, at the top, of course, you have the Conference of the Parties, which is the decision-making body for the CBD. Supporting this major decision-making body, there are a few subsidiary bodies. The first one that I mentioned here is the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice. This body, of course, brings the science and the scientific evidence that informs all the decisions that COP takes. You will also have the subsidiary body on implementation, which looks at how countries are actually putting the convention into practice, what is working, what's not working, what the political implementation is looking like at the local level. And more recently, there was the adoption and creation of the subsidiary body on Article 8J and related provisions, which focuses on indigenous peoples and local communities and the role of traditional knowledge in biodiversity conservation. This, of course, was a major milestone for us, and it actually really shows how we view and how parties mostly view the role of stewards for biodiversity conservation with these indigenous peoples and local communities. Finally, of course, you have the Secretariat, which is based here in Montreal, Canada, Quebec, which supports the role, the whole process. So organizing of the meetings, facilitating coordination, helping parties implement decisions, providing the best guidance, bringing different actors together to support implementation on the ground, really bringing these pieces of the puzzle together. So overall, it's a system that tries to connect science, policy, and implementation. So the Conference of the Parties is really where the fun happens, where everything comes together. It brings together all countries, usually every 2 years. Of course, you will recall that we couldn't have COP in 2020 because of the pandemic, so that kind of broke the system, but it was meant to always be every 2 years to negotiate and to adopt the decisions. So the process is quite structured, but very dynamic. It typically starts with an initial agenda with all these agenda items in plenary where positions are introduced. From there, discussions move into smaller settings, contact groups, informal consultations, working groups, where the actual real negotiation happens. These are often quite intense, and that's where compromises are found. So the aim is to reach an agreement by consensus, as Ingrid mentioned earlier. And once that happens, decisions are brought back to the plenary at the end of the COP for a formal adoption. So what you see in plenary is really the result of a lot of work happening behind the scenes and across many rooms, across many groups that come together to try and really push for more ambition and for these agreements to be really, really meaningful. One of the strengths of the CBD process is that it's quite inclusive. So while only countries and parties are allowed to have a say and adopt the decisions, there is a wide range of actors that participate as observers. This includes, of course, subnational governments, cities, regions, local authorities, and again, indigenous peoples and local communities, NGOs, youth, academia, private sector, finance sector, and so forth. Observers can intervene in discussions and submit statements, for example, but usually this needs to have the support of at least one party. So I think there is a very important role for these organizations such as ICLEI, Regions 4, etc., because they are the conveners of the subnational and regions and cities, and they can provide advice, they can do the convening work that is needed so that the interventions really reflect a multitude of views and can contribute to the process in a meaningful way. Participation in contact groups also is possible depending on how open the discussions can be, which in practice often allows for meaningful engagement. Again, in these contact groups, in these smaller settings, observers are oftentimes allowed to make interventions, etc., but they also need the support from parties. So this is a standard practice. So even without voting rights, observers play an important role in shaping the discussions and influencing the outcomes. And that power should not be overlooked. There is a lot of power in this opportunity there. So I think that my aim with this here was really to pinpoint and share with you opportunities for engagement that happen at COPs. So there is all this work that happens, you know, across the subsidiary bodies that actually culminate with COPs and the adoption of the decisions. But COP is not only about negotiations, it's also a platform for action, a platform for sharing information and knowledge. So alongside this formal process, there are many parallel events, many major events, summits, forums, pavilions, networking spaces, which were created exactly to provide an opportunity for these conversations to happen. For example, of course, we have the Summit for Subnational Governments and Cities. ICLEI is one of our main partners here to make this really happen and to make really powerful programs. The confirmed date for the Summit for Subnational Governments and Cities is confirmed for the 24th of October. We will also host a Business and Biodiversity Forum, the date set for the 25th of October, and a Finance and Biodiversity Day that has been confirmed for the 26th of October. So if you look at it, the way we built it was exactly a stepstone until the final days where we have the high-level segment and the adoption of the COP decisions. Other opportunities for multi-stakeholder engagement is the Action Zone. The Action Zone was actually a space created at COP15. It was actually in partnership at COP15 with the government of Quebec, which really stepped in and helped us create the space. A lot was being talked about in the discussions that led to the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework on the role of society, a whole of society. And for us, it really is the coming to life of what a whole of society means. We have a large space where we have dedicated hubs for each of the main constituencies or the main groups. And they build their own, they self-organize and they build their own program. And these are like focused dialogues. They are broad in nature. The space is very loud, and that's exactly the beauty of it. You know, you have different voices, and then sometimes you're there to participate in one dialogue, but you look across and the other one looks more interesting. So you go across there, and then there's this cross-fertilization. And I think this is one of the main legacies that we have. It was the innovation that we launched at COP15 that really stayed with us. We also have the GBF Pavilion. The GBF Pavilion is a space that was designed to bring all the partners together. This is not meant specifically for constituencies, so it's different in nature from the action zone, but it is where our implementing agencies, where main partners come together to showcase the activities and the actions they are implementing on the ground to also help with the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And of course, there's also knowledge and collaboration platforms. So we have a biodiversity capacity building and development forum. We have a technology and innovation expo, and we have side events and workshops. So all of this is a mosaic of activities and dialogues that make it meaningful. And although they are meant to support negotiations, they actually, I think, take a step further. They make negotiations real for the real people that are actually influenced by it, they're actually impacted by it, and they actually make an impact on it. So I think I tried to summarize the gist of it, but of course I remain open for questions. I hope this was useful. It was actually very useful for me, but bringing the slides together, I actually had to do some research. So there's always something to be learned there. So thank you so much for the opportunity again, and I'll stay here for questions and for any clarifications. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. I think that was excellent. It really was a great foundation. And yeah, it certainly is a very good segue also into our discussions. And in fact, there was a question in the chat box from Santiago Obispo around can subnational governments in mega diverse countries located in regions with limited access, such as the Amazon, participate in the CBD decisions fully and actively through the advocacy process. And I think you've provided part of the answer. And I hope now in the discussion that Frederique and I will have, where we look at why it's important for cities and regions to participate in CBD meetings. I have an idea what Frederique is going to say, and I think she's going to also contribute to this specific question. So Frederique, let me hand over to you, please. And then Bianca, if you could just shut down your PowerPoint, then we can have all three of us.
So I'm trying to stop sharing, but I cannot find the
Okay, maybe our tech team can help with it. There you are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. And again, that was stunning. Okay, Frederique.
Well, thank you very much. And it's really a pleasure to be with you today. And I'm quite jealous of your beautiful PowerPoint today, Bianca. I wish I had one. So bear with me. And I would first like to thank ICLEI for creating this space as well and for bringing together cities, regions, and national partners around such an important conversation and for the Secretariat participation as well. I think that when we talk about the Convention on Biological Diversity, we often think about negotiations, decisions, and global targets, but behind all of this, there is a very concrete question. Where does all of this actually translate into action? And the CBD, so the convention, sets global goals and collective ambition, but biodiversity is conserved in territories. And that is where subnational governments act. So we plan land use, manage protected areas, we oversee natural resources and implement biodiversity policies on the ground. And very concretely, this actually means that without action at the subnational level, global biodiversity targets cannot be delivered. And this is a reality that has progressively been recognized within the convention. Since the early 2000s, the convention processes have moved step by step from acknowledging the role of subnational governments to creating concrete conditions for their participation through, for example, dedicated mechanism, which I'll talk about, advisory bodies, and formal entry points. And this progress did not happen by chance. It was because of all of you, and it was made possible through sustained engagement by networks such as ICLEI and Regions 4, through the commitment of subnational governments willing to engage constructively, and through the openness of national governments as well, and through the continued willingness of the CBD Secretariat to listen and adapt. Thank you again. So today that phase is, well, we can say it's largely behind us. The question is no longer whether subnational governments have a place within the convention. I think that the question is now how we can make that participation more effective so that it genuinely supports implementation of the convention and its global frameworks. Based on Quebec's experience, I would like to share 3 key levers for doing so, and then briefly illustrate how this engagement is now extending into more direct forms of shared responsibility within CBD mechanisms. And the first lever is participation within national delegations. So Quebec regularly participates as part of the Canadian delegation in COP meeting. This allows us to bring territorial implementation realities directly into negotiations, particularly during intersessional meetings where technical and implemented related language is shaped. So this engagement starts actually well before the meetings themselves. Canada, that's how we work within. Canada shares its draft position with Quebec in advance. We review them together, ensure alignment, and when needed, raise specific requests related to subnational implementation realities. A clear example comes from SBI 6, which was held in Rome earlier this year, and I had the privilege to participate in. I saw Secretariat, and thank you, ICLEI, for your support as well. And during the discussions on resource mobilization, for example, proposals emerged that could have weakened explicit references to governments beyond the national level. And by working alongside with Canada and through an informal group, a working group that was chaired by Fiji, Quebec contributed to maintaining inclusive language referring to government at all levels in the decision text. This may sound a little bit technical, but wording really matters. It directly affects decisions and then the subsequent implementation. Also, Quebec plays an ongoing role of vigilance to ensure that references to subnational governments use terminology with a shared and well-established understanding among parties so that alternative expression in the text do not unintentionally exclude subnational governments. So the first level is fundamentally about alignment between global commitments and territorial delivery. The second lever we use is co-leadership within the CBD, so the convention, advisory, and formal bodies, where engagement becomes a little bit, well, becomes very concrete. And Quebec has been involved in the Advisory Committee on Subnational Governments and Biodiversity since its creation and has served as its co-coordinator since 2018. We also co-coordinate the local and subnational governments major group together with ICLEI, thank you again, Ingrid, and Regions 4. So this major group is a central mechanism. It's really crucial. It gives subnational governments official observer status. Very concretely, it gives us a seat, physical seat in the negotiation room and the contact group. So through the major group, we can take the floor during COPs, deliver formal statements, and submit coordinated inputs. So when parties take up those statements, they can be reflected directly in negotiated text, as Bianca mentioned. If one or more parties support it, it becomes a reality as if we were a party talking. So that is real tangible influence. And with the support of ICLEI and Regions 4, subnational governments are also organized in advance, align priorities, and speak with a unified voice. So keep updated with Regions 4 and ICLEI towards COP17. And we are also very personally very proud to serve as one of the spokesperson of this major group, ensuring that live territorial experience is heard directly within CBD decision-making processes. So to sum up for that level, I think that this lever, I have trouble pronouncing that one, shows that participation becomes institutional influence as well for subnational government. So the third lever, I got that right this time, is engagement through global coalitions. And that's a very important one. Coalitions have served a clear purpose. They really turn many individual subnational actions into one collective political signal for parties. As early as COP13, cities and regions issued their first joint declaration for biodiversity mainstreaming. For those in the know-how, the Quintana Roo Communique, I hope I pronounced it clearly. It stated for the first time that subnational governments are essential to implementing the convention. The logic actually continues today, and through coalitions such as the Group of Leading Subnational Governments, which is known as the GOALS, which was launched by Aichi around the Aichi target. And also, for example, the Subnational Government Task Force on the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. These are all big words, but essentially a task force of the HAC for subnational government. You might know the acronym. Well, subnational governments coordinate positions, and we also demonstrate collectively that ambition targets are achievable. And Quebec is very proud about having worked with California to launch the subnational task force that is focused on the 30 by 30 target, which is, as you know, a flagship goal where subnational governments have direct responsibility and leverage. So to sum up, the coalitions really build credibility and confidence among parties that ambition can be matched by capacity on the ground through the subnational government level. And beyond these three levers, I wanted to show you also how subnational engagement is beginning to extend directly into mechanisms of the convention itself. And it may go beyond influence and toward shared responsibility. And one of that example is Quebec's contribution to the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, the GBFF. That is one example. So by becoming the first subnational governments to contribute directly to the GBFF, Quebec sent a really clear political signal. It demonstrated support for this fund, first of all, as the official mechanism of the Global Biodiversity Framework, and shows that subnational governments are ready to share responsibility for implementation. So that gave us kind of a vote to say that we like the GBFF and we want to see it continue. The contribution also allowed Quebec to take part in the advisory committee of the GBFF, which is under the Global Environmental Fund. And it is a space where subnational governments do not traditionally have access. So that was a first. And through this role, Quebec was able to contribute to discussions on biodiversity finance and resource mobilization, and also engage directly with the development of tools and approaches to support implementation. So that was really an added value for us. And we would like to share that with you. And this reflects an evolving role of subnational governments, not only as implementers, but also as increasingly as contributors to the architecture of implementation itself. So to conclude, I hope I wasn't too long. I would like to emphasize that subnational governments do not compete with parties. We support them by helping turn global biodiversity ambition into action on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Frederic. And then maybe just from my perspective, representing ICLEI here now, not as the moderator, I think, looking at it from a city perspective, it mirrors in many respects what's happened. And the point that you made at the end here, we're not here to compete, but we're certainly here to support and contribute to subnational and national level. So there's this multi-level governance idea. But I think, looking back over the past 20 years, and I'm glad you took it back so far, Bianca, because I think that's really important. And you mentioned the 2010 decision, which was really, really important. And I should also say that the 2010 decision and then the one that was adopted in Montreal in 2015 are quite unique for the Rio Conventions in that they're the only decisions which have a multi-level governance mechanism, and attached to that, and both of you made the point about implementation, there's a plan of action. So it's not just words. So ICLEI has been involved in this for almost 2 decades now, representing local governments. We are part of the Global Task Force for Local and Regional Governments, and we're the recognized representative within the Rio Conventions, including the CBD. Frederic talked about the advisory committee. Those advisory committees are established in terms of these decisions that Bianca also referred to, and we coordinate the voice of local governments and cities, local authorities, municipalities, etc. And those are really important structures because it's a formal mechanism that allows the ambition and the voice of those cities to participate in the process, not just in COPs, but beyond COPs. And we use those structures, the 2 advisory committees, as well as some of the other formal bodies of the CBD, to develop and articulate that process. So when we go into these negotiations, the example that Frederic goes, it's not just a random input that we make. This is something that we've discussed through these structures. We discuss it also between ourselves as the representatives in a major group. And I think if we look back to what happened at COP15, we were very strategic in our approach. We decided, working together with our constituency, with our partners, with the Secretariat, and very important, Bianca made the point about you need the support from a party. So we knew which were the parties that support the whole idea of engaging subnational governments and local authorities. And we identified some key topics, and how we develop that is support them in taking those decisions, in making interventions that help them raise their ambition. And that's how these decisions, for example, Decision 1512 was adopted in Montreal. It had a whole pre-process through the Edinburgh process, which was very consultative, led by the government of Scotland, with a very, very strong support of the UK government, but also government of Quebec, Canada. I'm based in South Africa. The government of South Africa was also very supportive. Singapore, many cities and regional governments participated in that. So I think that's, that is an important thing. There was a question in the chat about ICLEI's role specifically. I hope I've explained that we represent the Global Task Force. We coordinate the advisory committee. We have a convening power. But we also make sure that we engage the constituency. So it's not just ICLEI speaking, but it's a mandated position. And we work very closely with the subnational government representatives. So I think the point, I think Frederico made it, is that we need the action, we need the contributions of subnational and local governments. And we're seeing increasingly, as we look at this year, at the global review, where are we in terms of meeting these targets? We're halfway through the decade, we've got 5 or so years left. I think the fact of the matter is, if you look at the commitments and the actions taken by local and subnational governments on the Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature platform, if it wasn't for that, the scorecard would look a whole lot less. That said, there's a whole lot more to be done. And I'm actually going to ask Bianca at this point, what advice can you give to local and subnational governments that are becoming engaged for the first time? There was a question around, as I said just now, how can, from the Amazon, where, regions that are not that easily accessible or have access constraints, how can they become engaged more effectively? What would your advice be?
Of course, I was muted, sorry. Thank you for the question, Ingrid. I think the first thing to say is that local and subnational governments, regions, etc., should not see themselves as an outsider to the CBD process at all. The Global Biodiversity Framework makes it very clear that implementation cannot happen through national governments alone. This is not a task that governments can do in isolation. That's where the whole of government and whole of society approaches come in, recognizing that cities, regions, local authorities, municipalities are essential actors in delivering the framework. So I think perhaps my first piece of advice would be engage early, engage consistently, reach out. If you're a municipality, reach out to your region or to your state, see who your allies are, discuss what is your reality, make consistent suggestions, Often local and subnational governments think engagement can only happen once you arrive at COP, but in reality, there's a lot of the important work that happens through intersessional process, national level. This means engaging with national CBD focal points, for example. The list is readily available in our CBD website. You can reach out to your CBD focal point, to start engagement. I think a second important point is to connect biodiversity objectives with local authorities. So if you're in charge of the environmental process or processes that happen in your region, in your area, how can you connect that with the local priorities? I think understanding what the local priorities are, what is the National Biodiversity Action Plan, what it looks like, how your region can contribute to it, and what can be used from what you're already doing can be very powerful. The GBF is global, but implementation is local. So issues like land use planning, green infrastructure, restoration, water management, etc., they happen on the ground. So the Maior biodiversity is integrated into existing planning and development processes, from the smaller to the larger, is easier to become, to demonstrate the relevance and build political support. I think working collectively would be also something I would advise. So there's a lot of power in, talking to the local communities, talking to academia, subsiding your choices with, scientific knowledge always has power. And I think finally, it is important to remember that visibility matters. So many local and regional governments are already delivering a lot of innovative biodiversity action, um, innovation, initiatives, etc. But that work is not always visible into the CBD process, into CBD language, or connected to national reporting processes. So I think that is the beauty of the convening organizations such as Regions for, ICLEI, etc. Being able to demonstrate these contributions to the process can significantly strengthen the engagement and recognition. So I think, just to summarize, engage nationally, internationally, connect biodiversity with local priorities, work through partnerships, networks, strengthen those partnerships, and communicate clearly.
Thanks. That's very practical and very useful. And that last one, I want to just latch onto that as we are, as I said earlier, this is the month of International Biodiversity Day. Watch this space. We're working closely with the Secretariat. There's going to be a whole campaign around that. That's about taking action locally for global impact. So it really, I think it's very opportune that we have that. But also, as I said, cities with nature, that point about visibility, make your commitments on cities with nature, on regions with nature. Bianca will know we worked very closely with the Secretariat and our partners, Regions for, Quebec, etc., in making sure that those commitments and actions feed into the global review process. And we have a lot of great plans around how we're going to raise that visibility, because visibility is one way not just of getting that global visibility and prestige, but it also helps attract investment. And we've seen that, happen often. So we need to wrap up. So I want to just maybe end off with a question, Frederic, to you. You actually said, we need to get more effective. We've had some really great ideas from Bianca around how that could happen sort of generically. But I'd like to hear, I know that in Quebec province, there's been some really great interventions and initiatives. So maybe just expand a little bit on some of the things that you've done there. And then I'll ask Bianca to make a last quick comment before I wrap up and close. Frederic.
Well, thank you, Ingrid. And I think that is very nice that I just answer after you two, because Quebec actually really does what you just said, Bianca. We really work in a collaborative way on the ground. And my recommendation on that would be really pragmatic and bounce back on what you said, Ingrid. I think that my main recommendation would be to focus on accountability. And I think it will be the strongest levers that we have at our disposal beyond national level negotiations. I think that tools like Regions with Nature and Cities with Nature are really, really crucial to move forwards. And they really help us to structure around what we're doing, track progress more clearly, and contribute to the better overall understanding of how global biodiversity framework is being implemented, and also give us a portrait of how it adds up at our level, at the subnational level and the city level. And I think that because of the next COP focus on results, we have a big opportunity there to build a much more clear picture of the impact of subnational government, and really working on capturing what we are doing in a way that can be related to the parties and added to the global report. And I don't want to give a scoop, but I know that the Secretariat is working on a special report for subnational government contribution. I'm scooping you because Quebec gave some financial contribution for that report, and I think it's really a step forward, and it shows that we have visibility, and it also gives us back the responsibility to track, measure, and make sure that it is visible at every level for us, for our citizens, but also at the global level. So that would be my answer, to be quite short.
Thank you. Accountability is an important one. We tend to forget. Forget that one. So I'm going to throw it back to you, Bianca, just very quickly, 2 minutes. What is your wish for local and subnational governments? What would you like us as a constituency, as a major group, very important one, as you've illustrated, to bring to COP or to ask of COP? And then I'll wrap up.
I think, thank you, Ingrid, for this. It is a loaded question. I think the key message is that the success of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework will be ultimately measured not by the ambition of the text alone, but by the action that inspires and enables on the ground. So we already know that cities and regions are stepping forward with solutions, restoring ecosystems, integrating biodiversity, strengthening resilience, etc. The challenge now, I think, is to ensure that these efforts are connected, they are supported, they are scaled through strong multi-level governance and meaningful collaboration across all levels of government. So I think COP will be a critical moment to bring this ambition to life. It's where commitments, partnerships, innovation, implementation must come together in a visible and accountable way. I think it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate that biodiversity action is already happening. And building on what you said, there is still a lot to be done. But we want this inspiration that comes from what you guys are already doing to inspire others to spread around. And we don't want 1,000 cities doing things. We want 100,000 cities doing things. And there's a lot of power in bringing all of these actors together and inspiring this action, learning with each other. So my big invitation to everyone participating today is come to COP. Come ready to showcase your leadership, your experiences, your solutions in a meaningful way. We need to make it visible. We need to show not only countries, but the whole of society, the power that these local actors have. We also want to reinforce the message that achieving the global goals will only be possible through all levels of government. We want to make sure that everyone is fully engaged. So this would be my dream.
Thank you so much. And that's actually a very apt response. I'm also looking at the last question we have there from Wei Wu, who talked about the session at COP30 in Brazil around the Blue Carbon Initiative and the International Mangrove Center. How can we follow the progress in 2026? So I would like to we don't have time to go into that, but I think this is a really great example of how we can show what's happening on the ground. And where we've got your contact details, I think we will follow up because I think that there might be a great opportunity. You saw the various opportunities that we have at COP that Bianca presented. We've got the summit, we've got side events, we've got all kinds of things. So we'll follow up with you. And then I just wanted to say that this is the beginning. We're going to have 2 more webinars. I see that my tech team did put in the chat box some more information. And really, our next webinar, I think if we can just check with them, let me just see my chat box where that is. It should be there in the link. But we will certainly we will be communicating further. We've got everybody in this group, and the reason we record is that we put it up on our website so that you can go back. But yeah, so thank you to everybody. We hope to see you in our next webinar. We will soon be making the formal announcement around and opening the registration for our summit. And also for the Action Pavilion. So please watch this space. We use not just our ICLEI website, but also with our partners, Quebec, Regions 4. We work very closely with the Secretariat, with CalGBA, Committee of the Regions, Goals, etc. And of course, through Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature. So let's just get your energy together. Let's show that ambition and show the world what we are doing and what we will still do more. Thank you, everybody, for your attention, and especially to my 2 speakers. Really fantastic, stellar inputs. And I'm also very jealous about that PowerPoint presentation this time.
Actually, I share the presentation with you guys. If you think it's useful, you can share the slides.
Absolutely. It's
Thank
stunning.
you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Goodbye,
guys.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone,
Ingrid,
for
as
joining
well.
us.